I personally think a lot of technical engineering tasks in the next like 3 to 5 years will be completely automated by AI. I'd say just go all in on creating stuff.
Welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ken G. I'm currently the head of data science at a company called Scouts Consulting Group. So our focus is on using data to help athletes improve their chances of winning. So a lot of the focus is on analyzing existing data from leagues and turning that into insights that either teams or individual players can use. Outside of that, I have historically made a ton of YouTube content. I've done quite a few podcasts, namely like Ken's Nearest Neighbors and the Exponential Athlete podcast. And more recently, I've been focusing on building some AI tooling. I think it's a really good market right now and a fairly limited window to be able to build things that are valuable to people to use. So I've been investing a ton of time in that. I also just wrote a book on guided imagery for elite athletes. So a lot of different things, a lot of fun stuff that that is in the fire right now.
That's incredible. Yeah, you're what's called, I guess, an original gangster in the data community. You've been a while for a while. You've been around for a while, and you've created a lot of content. I actually first got into data science and came across your channel, and it was one of my, I would say, like first introductions to the field. Um, and I think it would be really cool to kind of unpack your story with how you got started in data. I know that you're kind of moving away from teaching people about data science, and we can definitely talk about that later. But I think it would be really cool to go into your story, and kind of like how you got into data. Were you always like, did you always know you were cut out for this, or were there moments where you discovered data and you realized you had what it took to be really great in this field? So yeah, I would love to unpack this a bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me, for example, in high school that I would ever write a line of code in my life, I would have laughed at in your face. So it all started from specific interest. So I played a lot of sports growing up. I played baseball at a pretty high level. I played golf in college, and I tried to do that professionally afterwards. And as I was playing golf in college, I just started tracking some of my stats. I took an economics course, and that really opened my eyes to understanding trends and patterns in people and in data. And I realized I also took a statistics course. And one of the projects I did, I analyzed my own golf game. And when I immediately saw the value of the statistics, when it was applied to a real world problem that I was facing, it sort of lit off a light bulb for me. And I was able to see, hey, this is applicable to help me improve. What other areas can I use this new powerful tool to really create value for myself and for other people? And so as I continued to work, continue to play golf, I realized that, hey, maybe doing this on my own golf game isn't going to be as compelling as doing it on people who are really good, who have a lot more data than I do. So after I finished college and after I tried to play professional golf for a little bit, I started doing some work I worked at DraftKings for a summer. And so I sort of got a supercharger on the power of data, particularly in the betting markets. And I wasn't betting at the time, it was daily fantasy at the time. And then after that, through a series of very fortunate events, I ended up at my current company. And they needed someone to help support the US Ryder Cup team with analytics. So I started working on that specific problem. During that time, I also went back to get my master's in computer science. I figured that was a pretty relevant skill set for the data space. And during that master's in computer science, a little bit before that, before I did the master's in computer science, or like, I guess it was during it, I was making the transition from more traditional management consulting to data science, and I just started documenting that journey. And at the time, there really weren't a ton of resources about how to break into data science. So I found a really nice niche there. It was also right around COVID and the pandemic, where a lot of people were looking to develop new skills, particularly skills that they could do from home. And so it was a sort of perfect cacophony of events that led to a lot of traction and a lot of fun, a lot of videos during that period.
One thing that stands out to me is that you started out analyzing your own data. So like I think that's actually key for someone to really get into something is by really owning it. And I've noticed I think a really good way to really own data science for yourself is to analyze your own data and figure out a way to improve yourself, or in your case, to improve your golf game, your own golf game, using your own analysis. Like, I think that's something that I've noticed talking to people is that that's kind of like a key for people who really get into data science. Would you say you've noticed that too?
Yeah, I've seen, on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast, I interviewed over 100, I think over 150 different data practitioners, and that was a pretty common thread. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I would say at least 10-20% of people got started analyzing their own data. It's usually the lowest hanging fruit. It usually has the most meaning to you. Other things I see now are there's a ton of online communities, and there's a lot of data to be analyzed in those, particularly if you're interested in a specific subject area where there's a community around it. There's always opportunities to do projects that are relevant to you, but also relevant to a broader community. So I think that that's a great place. I don't think you necessarily have to. Like, there's people that are either just like really interested in data and coding, which you can kind of work on anything because it's the pursuit of the actual skill development. And then there's people that are really interested in a topic and they develop a love of the engineering side because they're working on something they care about, and it's a forcing function to push them towards learning more of those skills.
So one thing I'm also curious about is how do you go about managing your content creation with your full-time job and like all that you're doing? It's especially at first when like creating content is a new thing that you have to learn. Like, did you take a period where you just focused on content creation, or did you always juggle everything?
I pretty much always juggled everything. I am really lucky though. My job, I can kind of work from wherever I want. I can work most of the time at whatever times I want. So it's not like I'm in the office from 9 to 5. It's, hey, I can wake up and, or when I was doing more of it, I could do like write a script in the morning and then I can start work at 10 and work for 3 hours and then take a break and do some of the content and then get back to work. As long as I got all my work done, it didn't really matter when I worked. We have some specific deadlines over the course of the year. And as long as I hit those and excel at those, that's what really mattered in terms of outcome. So it's a little bit of a function of, hey, well-designed environment and lifestyle, as well as I was, particularly when I was making a lot of YouTube content, I was, working like 80-hour weeks between my job and content. But it didn't really feel like work. I mean, I've been very specific to design my life in a way that nothing I do really feels like work to me. It's a lot of like fun and exploration and play. And I mean, even in my job, I get to work on projects that I've come up with because I'm the main data person there. So I'm like, hey, this would be really valuable to study. Let's analyze this. And I get to run and manage the project. So the autonomy that I have across every area of my life makes everything my choice. And if it's my choice, I kind of have to have the energy for it because I've decided it's what I want to do.
That's awesome. So at your current job, like what type of projects are you taking on?
It's
What?
all sports analytics. So we work in golf and basketball. Largely, I mean, there's like two types of projects we do. So one is specific, like actually doing analysis, where we're helping a team solve a specific analytical problem. The other side would be more, it's closer to management consulting, where we're helping lay out analytic or data science or engineering roadmap for teams. And we help them hire the right people. We help them think about what projects they should be taking on that create the most value for the organization. And then we help with how do you create more of a data culture within that organization? Like, how do you get people, coaches, uh, back office, to our front office to be aligned with uh, the data and the projects and be open to it.
I'm a huge basketball fan myself. So would you say like one potential scenario that maybe you've explored or would explore would be like lineups, like helping teams decide like what lineups make sense, like if they actually are effective and
Yeah,
like
I mean
what
that's a big one. I mean, you have like adjusted plus minus, rate adjusted plus minus, and a bunch of those types of things, which are good tools. There's also like a lot more advanced stuff that you can do. We're not doing a ton of hands-on stuff with that, but that is a problem that like we address and help teams scope out.
very cool. A few people wanted me to ask you some things. So Adele wants to ask about how you use your data science background to get the most out of AI. And I think he's coming from an angle like given that you maybe understand how AI works under the hood, how are you leveraging it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that a little bit. I mean, honestly, I think data scientists are really good at asking questions and laying out frameworks, and being able to communicate effectively and ask the right questions of any of these models is one of the core skills that you develop, particularly when you're prompting. I would actually say that, so I took a very short stint as a like product owner um, at a different company for like 6 months. Maybe it's a little longer than that, but I actually think the skills that I developed there were way more relevant for interacting with AI and coding with AI. So a lot of it is scoping a project, creating requirements documents, making sure that if you're using like agents, that they collaborate well, that you have code review, that you have unit testing, and all these things in play. So in the future of AI, it's a lot more of a broad, high level, and like theoretical exercise, which I think is very interesting. Because like data scientists are really good at tuning and getting into the weeds, but I think the meta skill set is actually like going up a level. So an example that I would use is like in college, I don't know, grad school, uh, I took an algorithms class, right? And in data science, like computer science algorithms, we don't use like a ton. But in that class, I learned how to write, like you learn pseudocode, right? And you talk in pseudocode. Pseudocode is actually way more useful right now than like knowing a specific programming language. And so that's going up one level into theory where you're like, oh, actually, like understanding like how to communicate with a machine regardless of language is actually very valuable. And then you can go up a level of like, okay, thinking about systems and how they fit together. That's an even higher level up than talking uh, in like a pseudocode or like a computer type language. Um, and so the better AI gets, the higher level of theory and abstraction we get into that's useful. And so that's kind of interesting. You're like, oh, like when would I use like a lot of people in computer science or data science, they focus on like, oh, I want to learn the very like specific thing at the end. Like that's going to be most useful to me. I can implement it. With AI, I actually think it's going the other direction, and I'm glad I paid attention in some of those theory classes.
Yeah, it's kicking in now for sure. Um, I think it's interesting because the best way to be able to understand yourself, like the zoomed out theoretical, or it seems a lot of times like the best way to understand the system, the way things work from a zoomed out perspective, like to be able to see the systems in place, it is to focus in on the small details and then kind of build out from there. Um, the best probably way to be able to write pseudocode is to learn a coding language, and then from there you could maybe generalize. Maybe I'm not sure if you'd agree with that, but um, that's just a thought I had.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I mean, my onus for people is to still build stuff. I think that's going to help you develop the most useful theoretical knowledge. I mean, as I'm building some of the like SaaS tools that I'm working on now, the best way for me to learn the marketing, to learn the operations, to learn working with a team and collaboration and organization there is by doing it. And I can read all the books I want about it, and there is value in that. But the fastest and most useful lessons are going to be from implementing.
Agreed. Um, so one more question from the post from yesterday. Jerome wants to know how you see the market for data scientists right now versus when you started, and like how it's shifting?
So when I started, there was a lot more opportunity for entry-level data scientists. Um, I think now there's still okay opportunity for senior level data scientists. If I'm completely honest, I think AI tooling and a lot of the new technology that's evolving is really reshaping the data scientist role. I mean, data scientists, I mean, I don't write any code anymore. I'm using AI models to write all of my code. I still review it. And so, like, my setup, I use Cloud Code to write most of my code. I use Cursor to actually look through the code and to, like, if I do a Jupyter notebook or something like that, I'll go through it there. Um, if I'm thinking purely about output, I think we're at like a 5-10x output of what I used to be able to produce. And that doesn't mean that data science aren't necessarily useful, but it means that one data scientist can do 5x the work that they used to. So if you have 5 data scientists on your team, if you could have one person that can do the same amount, it means that technically we would need less data scientists at each company. Or there's some like middle ground where it's like we probably want we probably want to be producing more work than we're doing, but 3 data scientists could do way more work than 5 could in the past, and so we still get more by downsizing than we did before. Um, I personally think a lot of technical engineering tasks in the next like 3 to 5 years will be um, completely automated by AI. I think it's improving at a rate that I could not have even imagined. And so building some of those other skills, whether it's like the product skills, the marketing skills, the operation skills for supporting businesses is at a premium. And then those skills will be automated. And then we'll figure out what to do. I've been pretty vocal about this. My plan is to just buy a farm, and people will still always need a place to live, food to eat, and community. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, that's a little bit of a doomer philosophy, but I think like, it's also a forcing function for me to build stuff at a pretty rapid rate now, while I believe that data people or engineers still have an advantage at creating things.
I agree with your perspective. And yeah, like that kind of leads in nicely to the next topic, which is your hot take, which is that within, like, you have like a post on Twitter that's pinned, which is about like the situation now. And it kind of seems like you're on a mission that you basically have a finite timeline where you can use your technical skills to actually create value before maybe it's not even relevant anymore and the playing field is level and basically anyone can build anything without technical expertise. So I think, like, you just said 3 to 5 years. In the pin post, I think you said 6 to 18 months. It's really motivational to like start building now for someone like me who's and I'm sure for others. And there's a huge community around this. It's on Twitter. It's like building in public, and a lot of people are like excited about how much more they can create. And it's actually like the barrier to entry to learn technical skills is just shrinking. So it's exciting times. But yeah, for someone who already has put a lot of time into learning how to code, I could see it being scary. And for people who are learning to code right now, it might feel like, should I even keep doing this?
Yeah, so I think that there's benefits both directions. So let's take someone with engineering experience. I mean, I think there's this big thing with the T app that happened recently, where there's this mass data breach and a lot of people's information and pictures and all this stuff got out. The guy who built that had, I think, like 6 months of coding bootcamp experience. This might be like fake news. I don't really know, but that's an observation. But people with more engineering experience probably understand the security side of things. They understand like data infrastructure, and there's some nuance there where like someone without experience can get a product out probably right now with a lot of elbow grease, but it's going to be buggy. There's going to be user security issues. There's probably going to be trust issues associated with that. And so right now that's a moat, right? If I'm building something as an engineer, um, the quality of the product, the UI, UX, some of these things are very likely still going to be dramatically better because you have the experience on your side. For people that are learning to code, I actually think learning to code is more important than ever. Not that you'll be coding in the future, but I think learning to code teaches you how to think. So if you're coding without AI, you learn to solve problems in multiple ways. You learn about systems and infrastructure um, and like and algorithms and a lot of this other stuff, which is a framework to be able to communicate with these AI models. So the AI models will just build things in whatever way that is the most generalized. That isn't always the best for your use case. And having an understanding of how all that works, it helps you to communicate and articulate very specifically what you want from any of the models going forward. So I think that, like we study philosophy not to necessarily like know exactly what to do or to apply it daily, but we study philosophy for the framework and the kind of like meta way of thinking. I think coding in the future will be very similar to that, where we learn to code for the way it teaches us to think.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think we can already kind of see that in the coding languages that we are used to. Like they started very low level, like you'd have to understand more how the machine operates. Um, and then they've become higher and higher level and easy, more akin to like our language's syntax. Um, and that trend is only going to continue, especially with AI. One thing I would like to point out is that just because we've seen this sudden jump in progress with artificial intelligence doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to continue. And I guess point this out to be a contrarian. Um, uh, yeah, just because we've recently observed like a sudden jump in progress doesn't mean that the next progress is going to continue at this rate, is all I'd like to say. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
I mean, I'd probably respectfully disagree. I mean, I think if you look historically at, for example, what we thought artificial intelligence was, all the way back to the Turing test, um, they thought that they would solve, uh, like the Turing test would be solved in like a relatively short period of time, and it took way longer. With every AI advancement until very recently, people consistently um, underestimated how long things would take. And more recently, we've consistently overestimated how long things would take. So, like image generation, video generation, LLM communication, all these types of things. I would argue that that trend suggests an exponential curve. And I think humans consistently underestimate how fast exponential curves move. So, I mean, that's just my like hypothesis. There's no way of knowing. I think the world you describe absolutely could happen. I mean, it's a probability distribution, right? Um, but I am putting my eggs more in the basket of this is going to move unbelievably fast, faster than we can perceive. And I'm going to do everything that I can to be like ahead of that if that were to happen, right?
Well, it only benefits you to think that way because it pushes you to do more and to adapt quickly. So it's a great mindset to have.
Yeah. And I think if we look at a lot of other trends, so you look at, for example, social media, you look at TikTok, Instagram, all of these things, they've evolved at a faster rate than I believe humans are adapted to work with them. So the dopamine spikes from constant updates, the like how addicted everyone is to their phones, like we're maladapted for that. Like it should have taken us like hundreds of years to adapt to something like that, so it doesn't completely take over our mind or our dopamine system. And like I I think I have really good willpower, all these things, but I'm still a slave to my phone, right? And so what happens when technology continues to evolve at this rapid rate is I feel like we don't uh, unless we are unbelievably on top of it, we don't adapt fast enough, and we get either left behind or other negative consequences. So my focus is on not necessarily adapting to the individual tools, but adapting to the possibilities that these tools create.
I think those are some great points. So I saw you started a poll today about your newsletter tool that you're building. Would you like to talk a bit about that? Like, what's the idea behind this?
Yeah, so I've been writing a newsletter for my podcast, The Exponential Athlete, for I think the last like 12 months. And I had some major pain points with it. So consistency was a big one. Getting compelling titles was another one. Um, and I think newsletters are one of the most valuable tools for people right now. So if we talk about this trend of increasing innovation, and if AI continues to develop, where development is not a competitive advantage anymore, like if you could just replicate whatever I build tomorrow, um, what's going to keep people interested in using a product? And that would be a brand you create, a mailing list that you have, whatever it might be. And I see newsletters as being one of the most effective ways to uh, essentially like create a really good relationship with your community, with the core people who use your product. They are something that you own. So like on X, on any of these platforms, you can get banned relatively easily. If you have a mailing list and a newsletter, you own that audience at a dramatically higher degree. And so the thought is that I think newsletters are going to continue to develop and continue to remain very important. And there also aren't as many tools for supporting newsletters like there are for creators across all these other platforms. So I wanted to create essentially the best suite of tools for people who are wanting to make newsletters. So whether you have a YouTube channel, for example, and you want to turn that YouTube content into newsletters, or if you're an existing newsletter creator and you want to be able to like expand your audience, you want to be able to refine and optimize your titles. To me, there is just a ton of opportunity there. I think everyone should have a newsletter, and I am excited about sort of leading the charge of tooling into that space.
I think it's really cool you're working on this and really smart that you're doing so. Uh, it kind of reminds me of another point, which is how, like, as more and more things get automated, your individual taste becomes the only differentiating factor in what's out there. So, like, not only is code getting automated, but writing is automated, also video is automated, images are automated, everything can be automated. So, it's much more just like, yeah, your branding, your taste, your message, which is individual to you that you choose to, I guess, put out there. That's like the only differentiating factor eventually, I guess, is kind of what I see.
I agree with that statement. I think that's like a kind of Steve Jobsian philosophy, which is continuing to perpetuate. A lot of people are creating really good value out of the gate. A lot of these people in the building public community, they're getting customers. They have a good product, but they're getting customers because people like them and they like the journey they're on. Uh, I'm not working by myself on this. I have a couple of friends who are supporting me, and our focus has actually been a lot on the branding. Um, to me, that's going to be a differentiator in the long run. And the product is called Newsletter Hero. We're doing the wait list now. We're probably going to go live at the end of next week. But we had kind of cute little newsletter hero that helps you on your way across all of the user experience and these types of things. And like, it seems silly. A lot of people are like, oh, just test and like get stuff out there. But if we think about it from a long-term perspective, yeah, short term, nobody's going to care that we have this cute little caricature and good branding. But in the long term, that's going to be something that really helps us to differentiate, right? If we make a suite of tools that are all these little heroes and like people know the brand and recognize what we're creating is valuable, they'll choose us over other people because of that familiarity or because there are these little elements that they like. And so I think that for better or for worse, if all the tools become the same, the branding and the user experience and the people behind it are what are going to be the big differentiators. And that's something we can continue to build regardless of the product that we build. And so a lot of the focus now, I mean, I'm working on building a brand around that for me personally. And it doesn't guarantee that whatever I produce in the future will be successful, but it dramatically increases the probability that it will be.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like you said, we're very slow to adapt and technology is zooming past us, but our needs and like the things that make us human, um, they stay the same. I guess by that varies because of that, like it we can get taken advantage of by technology if we can't keep up, but we can also use that information to understand how to adapt better and leverage that. And I think that, yeah, focusing on human connection and branding is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in focusing on what doesn't change. I've done a lot of tweets and random stuff or whatever you call them, posts on X about that. I mean, get a lot of inspiration from Jeff Bezos, from Charlie Munger. Those are two people I think really figured it out. And a common theme is like, what is not going to change, right? People, let's take the newsletter product. I think people will continue to want newsletters to own their distribution. That's like one thing that won't change. I think people will always want an easier way to produce the things that they do. So that's not going to change. Like producing content, they'll want it to be easier. Doing subject lines, they'll want it to be easier. Saving drafts, any of these types of things, they'll want it to be easier. And they'll want it to be lower effort. So like easier and lower effort aren't necessarily the same thing. So one of the things we did from a lot of the user research when we're looking at newsletters is that like consistency is very hard. Idea generation is very hard for a lot of people to consider. You know, if you're doing it once a week, it's hard to come up with this stuff. So all of those things related to content creation, we don't see changing. And then the last thing is like the brand. Like people are going to want a product that they feel good using, and that's not going to change. And that has good user experience. That is like, whether it's fun or whether it gives them a good feeling inside or whether they like the founders. That's not going to change. And so the intention is to just hammer on those things that aren't going to change and do them to the best of our ability. I mean, I fully recognize there's a lot of subject line generators on the market. To be perfectly frank, basically all of them are not very good. And if we can produce a product that is just dramatically better in that space and hyper focus on it, we can win market share there. And also, hopefully, if I'm somewhat likable, that helps too.
Yeah, and just the very fact that you're deciding to focus on headlines and helping people be consistent, that already sets you apart as well because other tools I'm sure have different focuses, but what you decide to focus on with your tool, it's really important. With regards to branding, it's also something that's really a big interest of mine as well, like growing your audience, and a big part of that is branding. And when you talk about consistency, I've noticed in my experience that the most like you want to be able to define your brand like as a beginner, you want to know what your niche is, but the thing is that the best way to actually define those things is to just put yourself out there and try and look at your terrible content and decide what direction you want to move in next. And it's very much just an iterative process where you kind of discover what it is that you like talking about, that other people want to learn about, that creates value.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that. So like, let's talk about how we did market research for Newsletter Hero. So I reached out to almost 20 people that have newsletters that I know, and I asked them what their pain points were. Right. So when we're creating a brand, we can focus first on the consumer. I also scraped like thousands of Reddit posts around pain points for newsletters. So we got sort of an idea around what people were saying were the challenges that they were facing. So we have a little bit more idea about, okay, this is a framework for like either content or things that people are struggling with or relevant topics. So like the top topics were community. So like they didn't really have a community around posting newsletters. Subject lines, like optimizing those. And then content creation. So being consistent with it or creating things that were unique. And then we had obviously the ideation and then like posting across multiple platforms. Like my personal hypothesis is that newsletters are becoming more unique via the platform. So like Beehive has a different purpose than Substack. So Substack's becoming like more bloggy. LinkedIn has a different purpose than either of those, and then Medium has a different purpose altogether. So like repurposing your newsletter across all four of those platforms actually has benefit, and like people are going to eventually want to post cross-platform, and we're going to build that eventually. But from the user research, we determined that actually isn't the biggest pain point people are facing. So like we'll build it. It is a pain point, but it isn't the most like salient one. So all of that information comes in. We can analyze that and say, hey, these are reasonable topic points. If you're posting on LinkedIn, if you're posting on any of these places X and you're building a brand, you can think about, hey, what are the questions people have? Like analyze the communities that you're in, and you have some source material for that. And then it comes to what you're describing is just putting stuff out there. Like you can base it on that framework. You can just post what you like. That's a lot of what I've been doing is like just posting stuff I think is interesting. And then you get that immediate feedback. But I think there's sort of a cold start problem where a lot of people don't have the audience to get the feedback. I'm very fortunate that I do. And the research up front and thinking about how to do that creatively, I actually think really helps to solve that problem. So I agree with you 100%. I think the user feedback and the iteration as you go is the most important thing. But if you're like, man, I don't have any feedback because I'm new to this, there's other avenues you can go to get you started in the right direction, which is largely just research.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If you can create a community that helps people get feedback earlier, that provides a ton of value. Because nowadays, when you try to start writing online or start putting content out, it usually will take a while before you get to the point where people even look at what you put out there. I know it took me a while, and the best way for the way that I started getting people to look at what I wrote or posted was by manually replying to a bunch of people's posts or stuff. And that takes a lot of time. And when you're a beginner, it could feel like a lot of work for just a little bit of reward, and it's just not worth it. So if you can help them get feedback without putting in so much work to get feedback, that would be a great value proposition. So sounds awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the research, um, as a data scientist or anyone who's analytical, that can be fun too. You can also make content around that. I think something that's really interesting in the world we live in now is you can kind of make content out of anything. And so like you can bear fruit from the research, but you can also make content around the research. And there's, you double your content output effectively, right?
Very cool. Okay. So if you a cool question to ask is like if you could speak to you maybe like when you're first starting out in data science and like give yourself some advice, what would you say?
I kind of like how things turned out. I mean, honestly, I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, I still work in data science, but I'm building stuff more now. I mean, I think there's always an onus of just, like, frankly, just building a ton of stuff. I would say double down on that. In the world we live in, I mean, the world we live in now is so different than it was before. Like, you can build something really meaningful in an afternoon now. I mean, I've done two projects that were meaningful. Like, I built basically a little bot that scrapes all the newsletter Reddit communities and it just alerts me on Discord when there's a post that is relevant for me to reply to about Newsletter Hero, right? Super easy. And then the other day, I scraped a ton of like all the top newsletters from Substack and like got all the headlines. And so I can actually use that to do some analysis or improve the quality of our tool. Like I did those in a couple hours, where historically that would take me weeks. And if I was Ken living in the current world, I'd say just go all in on creating stuff. Learn not only how to build, but how to grow something. So there's an element of marketing, there's an element of operations, there's all these other things around creating a product that's really valuable. And I think those are going to have a longer shelf life than just the coding. Um, Maybe my advice would just be like learn how to think more than how to just code. Um, I think I did a fairly good job of that, but there's always areas to improve. Um, I also would have, I tried to start quite a few businesses related to data, and I didn't understand the value of distribution and the end user. So anything we build as data scientists, engineers, whatever it is, it's for someone. And really figuring out how to create value for that person, get feedback from that person, build an audience around something like that is really important. Like just if you're building something with the intention of selling it, don't build it first. Get some feedback, some information, collect some data first.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Um, and I think, like, to summarize what you said, it sounds like you would tell yourself to start building as much as you can. Basically, what you're doing now. Start building as much as you can now, and I guess learn as much about, I guess, but at the same time, don't keep yourself from learning as you do it. Like, don't just have uh, your AI coding tools make everything for you. Like, learn why it's doing what it's doing as well, and then
Yeah,
also build your distribution as much as you can so that you can do market research.
yeah. I mean, in
Building.
the world we live in now, I'm not as worried about just letting the AI coding tools do what they do. Like, I think it's relatively important to understand what they're doing, but it's getting less and less so as they improve. I think that there's some element of like finding what makes sense for you to focus on, like your unique strengths, and then what you can outsource. So in some element, like we're going to be able to outsource coding to a certain point. Like we do this all the time, right? Like CEO of a company, they have engineers or a CTO or whatever it might be, and like the CEO of the company probably doesn't know exactly how the code works, right? And that's okay for their use case. Um, I think it's trending more like that for the things we build. I think we still should absolutely know what we're building, or else we have that TAP situation. Um, but there are the other elements and like the downside consequences of what could go wrong that are always really important to understand. Like we don't have to know the code base to understand how we could have vulnerabilities, that could have like security issues, could have like massive bug issues that aren't fixed. And like that's where the sweet spot is.
This makes me think of something else. So yeah, like we talked about earlier, how the barrier to entry to learning how to code is steep. Like it's a painful process to force yourself to learn that skill. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So that's why I paid so well, like historically, to learn it in partially is because a lot of people didn't want to put themselves through that pain. But not all skills are like that. Not all skills have such a steep learning curve. For example, I'll bring up fighting sports to better help me illustrate this. So, there's this martial art called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm sure you're familiar. It is
I train.
notoriously has a very steep learning curve. Like the first 6 months, you go from like not knowing how to submit anyone to knowing the basics, and it's like you know how to roll around with people and defend yourself. But and that's a very steep learning curve. And then the other end of the spectrum, you have something like boxing or Muay Thai, where anyone can throw a punch without even having studied a martial art. And it takes many years to slowly perfect the craft to notice a difference between someone who's trained and not trained. Do you get my point?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting you say that. I think that there's like some nuance there where someone might just like love the struggle of coding or be like unbelievable, have like unbelievable aptitude in doing it. So like let's take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like you have a BJ Penn, right? Who's just like really good at it, probably also loves it. And those people are going to have a massive advantage in coding or Jiu-Jitsu, right? Whereas like everyone going into Jiu-Jitsu isn't necessarily going to have like uh, that meteoric growth. And so part of it is also finding like things that you're uniquely skilled at that don't feel like work to you, but are feel very difficult to other people.
Mhm.
Um, But I understand what you're saying. Like the metaphor is that, hey, like
Yeah, yeah,
perhaps like marketing or something along those lines is more like a boxing, right? Where everyone like the floor is a lot higher. Where in coding the floor, I mean the floor is lower, whereas in coding the floor is generally higher.
and it's like as AI changes the landscape, so like the floor is lowering for these some of these skills like coding, and I'm not sure if it maybe the same it could be said for something like marketing, which historically has like a very gradual learning curve. Um, and just thinking about like how this changes the landscape, and when you're being strategic about like what skill set you want to build, taking into account your likes and your proclivities, like you mentioned, but then also thinking about what to outsource. Like maybe it makes more sense now than ever before to outsource certain things or not. I think it's really interesting to think about like how this all comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, I also, if we're talking about coding versus marketing, I'll probably get some hate for saying this. That's a pretty hot take, but I think that like coding in the next couple of years will be easier to outsource than marketing. And I say that because coding, the rate at which it changes is dramatically lower or slower than the rate at which marketing changes. So, I mean, yes, AI is giving you the ability to code faster, but like the infrastructure we're using to build is moving like kind of fast, but not like unbelievably fast. I like thinking about building a basic website, like you have a back end and a front end, and then you have some like UI. Right? Like that is not probably not going to change in the foreseeable future. But marketing, we have completely new social media platforms. You have these algorithms that change regularly. You have like a change in Google SE in how like they rank web pages that changes your SEO. You have like differences in paid marketing that change very rapidly. Like although the floor is lower in marketing because of the speed that it's changing, uh, you want someone that has like very, very high skill and very high knowledge. And that's almost harder to replicate now than an engineer. And it might already be harder to replicate than a really good engineer, or than like a okay engineer. So that's my hot take. I'm sticking to it. And yeah.
I think I just might agree with you. But I definitely need to do some more thinking about this before I come up with my personal hot take.
Forget.
But yeah, man, these were like all the questions I think I had for you. It was really cool to have you on the show. Is there anything you would like to leave off with? Um anything you're working on or where people can find you?
Yeah. So main place to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just my name, Ken G. You can find me on X/Twitter at Kenji_DS. I'm doing a lot of build in public stuff there, sharing about the process of building Newsletter Hero. If you already have a newsletter or you're looking to make a newsletter, definitely check out newsletterhero.ai. We have a waiting list up right now. The intention is to go live late next week. We're very excited about that. We'll have a beta that has a lot of like free use credits, and we're just looking for feedback. We're trying to make the best possible product for this audience, something that's at the core of what we're doing. And I'm having fun building it. You know, we'll learn. If it flops, it flops, and we learn. If it does great and it doesn't, I'm sure you'll hear about it more from me as well. Thank you for having me on.